So just before we start in regards to the graduate visa explanation, just a quick explanation in regards to common routes for students following graduation. So if, for example, so there's two types, for example, so there's situations where you could go to certain visa categories where you have completed your course, or as students, there may be possibilities where you could switch into another visa category without having to complete your course. So in the orange or yellowy section at the top where it mentions complete your course, the visa options are you could switch into a graduate visa. But again, with a graduate visa, you have to successfully complete your course, which Nancy will explain to you in due course. And also in regards to switching to a skilled worker visa, that could be a possibility again once you complete your course. The other visa category, in regards to where completion of the course isn't required. So there could be situations where you could actually switch into a skilled worker visa where you haven't completed your course, and I will explain that later on, but that's usually circumstances where the certificate of sponsorship has a date or start date of your employment after your completion course date. But like I said, I will explain that later. There's a visa category called a global talent visa, which some of you or all of you may have heard of. That's separated into different categories. And again, that will be touched upon later. And also there's a possibility of switching to a family type visa. So if you have partners who are British citizens or settled here in the UK during your period whilst here as students, and you wish to switch into a marriage or partner related type application or visa category, and that could be a possibility. That could be done at any time and doesn't necessarily have to be until after you complete your course or successfully completing your course. So I'm going to pass you over now to my colleague, Nancy, who will talk to you about the graduate visa.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, and hello everyone. My name is Nancy. I'm a senior caseworker at Latitude Law. Today I'm going to talk you through the graduate visa route. So most of you must be already familiar with this visa route. This is for a international student who has achieved at least a bachelor degree in the UK to apply, and they can stay in the UK for a further 2 or 3 years. So 2 years if you've achieved a bachelor's or master's degree, and you can stay 3 years if you've achieved a PhD degree. Graduate visa route cannot be extended, so you have one chance to apply. And if you have previously held permission under the doctorate extension scheme, then you won't be eligible. So be aware of that. This route does not lead to settlement, so you can only stay in the UK for 2 or 3 years. However, if you do want to rely on your 10 years lawful residence in the UK to settle, then you can count the period you stayed in the UK as a graduate towards your 10 years lawful residence in the UK. And like most applications you make, you have to meet 3 parts of requirements, and they're divided into validity, suitability, and eligibility. And I will walk you through them one by one. Okay, so first of all, the validity requirements. So essentially, these are related to whether you have submitted a valid application. This is very important for students in the UK, because if you want to submit a graduate visa application in the UK before your student visa leave expires, then these essentially will engage you into this so-called Section 3C leave. So you will have Section 3C leave if you've made a valid application in the UK before your current leave expires. And if you haven't made a valid application, so if you've not met these validity requirements, then your application would be classed as invalid, and you will risk of being an overstayer in the UK. So it's really important that you meet these requirements. And these requirements include, for example, you have to make the correct application fee. This is £822. You have to pay the IHS fee. This has increased earlier this year, so it's now calculated as £1,035 per year. So if you're applying for 2 years, that's going to be 2,105. If you're applying for 3 years, then that's about 3,105, I think. Sorry, my math is not very good. But yeah, you just need to time 2 or 3. You have to submit your biometric information. So most of you would have a valid student BIP. So you could apply using the IDV Check app. So you basically just need to download this UKVI app on your phone, and you will need to take a selfie and scan your BIP. Or if you can't do this, you can always attend a TLS visa appointment center to submit your biometric information. UK VCAS has now been replaced by TLS. And from our recent experience, the biometric appointment is really difficult to book. So make sure if you have travel plans, make sure that you book your appointment, immediately after you submit your application. Supporting documents will need to be provided. We will go through them later on. And be mindful that to submit a graduate visa application, you must be in the UK. So these type of applications, you can't submit overseas, okay? You have to be in the UK. And specific evidence will need to be provided if you have been awarded a scholarship or sponsorship by, for example, a government or an agent in the past 12 months, which, you used towards your, for example, expenses for your course fees and stuff. A decision is usually made within 3 to 8 weeks of your biometric appointment. If you've applied using IDV Check app, then the processing time will start once you submit your application. If you're going to a TLS center, then the processing time will start after your biometric appointment, and there is no priority service. So you have to be in the UK the whole duration once you've submitted your application. So make sure that you plan your travels accordingly if you do have overseas travel plan. The suitability requirements generally relate to your conduct, your criminality history, for example, but I'm sure you will meet all these requirements. I just want to mention that you have to submit this application before your student visa expires, so you're not in breach of UK immigration law. And also, if you have previous refusals for your, visas for the UK or any other countries, make sure that you disclose this in your application. So do not try to withhold information, because previous refusals might not affect your application at all, but not including this information might affect your application. Okay, and the eligibility requirements. So to apply for a graduate visa, you essentially need to score 70 points. And first of all, you need to have successfully completed your course of study. Your course of study must meet the qualification requirement, and you must have been in the UK for at least 12 months. And we'll look at them one by one. Okay. First of all, successful completion of your course. So your sponsor of student visa must be a higher education provider with a track record of compliance. So if you've studied with University of Manchester, you're fine. You'll be able to meet this requirement. And secondly, you must have successfully completed the course during last grant of permission to study. So what this means, for example, if you have achieved, for example, a degree, a bachelor's degree, and then you go on to study master's degree, and you got a new student visa for your master's degree, and unfortunately, you failed your master's degree, and you want to apply for a graduate visa relying on your bachelor's degree, this is not allowed, because you got a new student visa to study your master's degree, and you must have completed your master's degree successfully before you can apply. Does it make sense? Yeah, great, okay. And you will be able to apply even if you have changed course of study without a fresh student visa application, but you have to have completed the course that you've changed to. And finally, the university will notify the Home Office of your successful completion by bulk upload. So at the end of your semester, the university will upload all the students' information to the Home Office who have successfully completed your course. If you're not sure when you submit your graduate visa application whether the university has done that, I would advise to get in touch with the university to confirm, because the Home Office won't grant your application until they've received such information from the university. Qualification requirement. So as previously mentioned, you have to have at least got a bachelor's degree. You can rely on a master's degree, PhD, that's all fine. And there are other additional relevant qualification that you can rely on. For example, law conversion course, legal practice course. And if you have hold permission and as a student's union sabbatical officer, you can still apply, but you have to have completed your course before you undertake this role as a student union sabbatical officer. Okay, and finally, studying the UK requirement. If your course is less than 12 months or 12 months, then you have to study in the UK physically for the whole duration of your course. And if your course is longer than 12 months, then you have to physically be in the UK studying your course for at least 12 months. So that's quite straightforward. Conditions of your status as a graduate. So as previously mentioned, if your application is successful, you will get to stay in the UK for a further 2 years. If you've got a bachelor's or master's degree, you can stay in the UK for a 3-year period if you've achieved a PhD degree. There is no restriction on what you can do. So you can be employed, you can be self-employed, you can be unemployed if you wish. There is no restriction at all. The only thing is that you can't work as a professional sports person. You can't have access to public funds. You can study, but you shouldn't be studying a course which is normally going to be sponsored by, for example, a university. Okay, your family members, you can include your spouse, your partner, and your children in your application, but your family members must have already been in the UK as your dependents on your student visa. So you can't bring your family members from overseas if they're not already in the UK as your dependents. Your partners need to meet certain requirements. For example, their relationship with you must still be genuine and subsisting. They need to provide, for example, cohabitation evidence to show that they've been living with you. Your children should be under the age of 18, and there should be suitable arrangement for their accommodation in the UK. The benefits of being on the graduate visa route. So this allows you to be very flexible with your employment. So like I previously said, you don't need to be employed, but if you do want to be employed, you can work for anybody in the UK. They don't necessarily have to hold a sponsor license. You can be self-employed as well if you want to start a business in the UK. So it offers you a lot of flexibility. This is a very preferred route by a lot of employers because they will have an additional 2 to 3 years where they can assess whether you are the suitable candidate for the job. And if you are, and if they do hold a sponsor license, then they can offer you sponsorship to switch you into the skilled worker visa route after your graduate visa leave. And yeah, that's just the third point on the PowerPoint. You will be able to switch into other visa route, for example, the skilled worker visa route, if you have obtained a sponsorship from a sponsor license holder. And with skilled worker route, which Mohammed will cover later on, it does lead to settlement in the UK after 5 years. Here are some suggested documents you can apply, you can submit with your application. So you have to submit a copy of your valid passport. By the way, all the documents now just need to be uploaded to the TLLS application portal or the UKVI application portal. So you don't need to submit originals. A copy of your valid passport, your e-visa, because as we all know, the Home Office are moving digitally after this year, 31st of December. So make sure, if you haven't done this, make sure you register an e-visa before you travel overseas. A copy of your CAS, confirmation of acceptance of studies, evidence of completing your qualification, for example, your degree certificate. If you have got a scholarship in the last 12 months, then you will need a consent letter from the government or agent who's granted you the scholarship. And if you have dependents, then like previously mentioned, you will need to submit evidence to show your relationship with your family. Here are some common questions and answers. We'll go through them. So first question, can students submit graduate application before receive final results? So like previously mentioned, the university will inform the Home Office by bulk upload. You can submit your graduate visa application before you receive your final results. There's no restriction on doing so, but just be mindful that your application won't be approved until the Home Office actually hear from the university of your final results. So they need to make sure you have successfully completed your course. Second question, can students submit before all course fees have been paid? So the answer is no, because paying your course fee is part of your course. So if you haven't paid all your course fee, then you haven't successfully complete your course. So make sure you pay all your course fee before you submit your application. The third question, I think we've mentioned, what if the name of your course has changed? If it's changed by the university, then you will still be eligible, so don't need to worry. And the last question, which we get a lot from students, can I travel outside the UK after I have completed my course, but before I submit my application for a graduate visa? So the short answer is yes, you will be able to travel overseas. But just to be mindful, as previously said, the graduate visa needs to be submitted in the UK. So you must make sure you come back before your student visa expires, and you have plenty of time when you come back to submit and prepare your graduate visa application. The only exception is we've had this where the student is on a kind of accelerate program where the course end date is much earlier than the end date on their CAS. So in these circumstances, the university has informed the Home Office that the course has ended much earlier. We're talking about a year earlier than the course end date on the CAS. And then the Home Office cancelled the student visa because it ended much earlier. So if you're just talking about like 2 or 3 months, then you should be fine. You should be able to travel outside the UK, but just make sure if you want to apply for graduate visa, make sure you come back early enough. Okay, that's all from me, and I'm going to hand over to Mohammed, who will run through the skilled worker visa with you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. That was very well explained in regards to the graduate visa route. And if you do have any questions in regards to the graduate visa route and the skilled worker, like I said, we will have a Q&A section at the end. So today I'll be talking about the skilled worker category. And in regards to the category, if you are offered sponsorship, you could switch into a skilled worker category having completed your course. So unlike the graduate visa, where you have to have successfully completed a course, in order to switch to the skilled worker category, you just need to complete your course. That's one of the main requirements. The skilled worker route does lead to settlement. So after 5 years in the UK, as a skilled worker, you can obtain indefinite leave to remain or settlement. Whereas, as Nancy explained, the graduate visa, similar to a student visa, doesn't lead to settlement. But so in order for the clock to start running for your 5 years, you will have to switch to a skilled worker category. Now, like all visa applications, as Nancy explained, for the graduate visa, there are the validity requirements, which means that you have to submit a valid application prior to your visa expiry date, pay the correct fees, submit your biometrics either by the ID check app or at TLS Centre. And the suitability requirements remain the same. Any criminal convictions, any previous adverse immigration issues, for example, refusals, all must be disclosed, and failure to do so, if the Home Office were to find out later, then it could have, obviously consequences for your application. And hopefully everything will be cleared by the time you apply in terms of no criminal records, etc. And there's the eligibility requirements. So again, all visa applications require you to meet certain eligibility requirements, which I'll touch upon now. So sorry, just before I go on to, one of the main eligibility requirements is in regards to being able to switch to the skilled worker category as a student. There's 3 main conditions, and you have to satisfy at least one of the 3. So that's A, B, and C. So in regards to A, you have to have completed a course for which your the confirmation of acceptance of studies, for example, your CAS was assigned for. So as long as you complete your course, then you will be able to satisfy condition A and switch into the skilled worker category. Condition B is it's broken down into 2 parts. So you must be studying a course at a degree level or above with a higher education provider with a track record of compliance. So as long as you're doing a bachelor degree or above at the University of Manchester, for example, which has got a track record of compliance, then that will satisfy number 1 of condition B. In regards to the second part of condition B, is that the certificate of sponsorship, so which is also known as a COS, must have a work date no earlier than the course completion date. So as long as the COS date has a date after as long as the COS date has the end date, let me start again. As long as the COS date has a start date before the end of the completion date, that should be fine. In regards to PhD students, so let me just go a bit here, it's a bit more bigger for me to see. Must be studying at a full-time course, had to study leading to a award at PhD level with a higher education provider. So again, similar to B in the sense that the only difference is this is a PhD course, and the certificate of sponsorship must have a start date no earlier than 24 months after the start date of that course. So as long as the start date of the course is after 24 months of having completed your PhD course, then that will be fine. So you don't need to completely complete the course. As long as you've done 24 months, then that should be fine to satisfy condition C. But most of the times, just to let you know, it probably will be condition A, where you complete your course and then switch into a skilled worker category. And in terms of the eligibility requirements, so the eligibility requirements is broken down into 70 points, of which there's the first 50 points, which will include having a certificate of sponsorship. The job has to be at an appropriate skill level. There is an English language requirement, and also the other 20 points to make 70 points is in regards to what is known as tradable points, which is to do with salary. And I'll break down each requirement in regards to the 20, 20, 10, and 20 over the next few slides. So the first criteria to get 20 points in order to satisfy the 70 points is you need to be offered a certificate of sponsorship. So a certificate of sponsorship is very similar to your CAS in the sense that it has details of your personal details and, more importantly, your employment details. So for example, your relevant SOC code that you're going to rely on. A SOC code, just to let you know, is when you do apply for a skilled worker category, there has if you go to what is known as appendix skill occupations, they have a list of all potential skilled worker roles which has the relevant salary requirements and a relevant code. It's like a 4-digit code. So if you're applying as an IT engineer, for example, you'll have a random code of 2134, for example, and you use that as part of your skill worker application. So again, as long as you've got your certificate of sponsorship, which is being provided by a sponsored licensed company, then that's the first 20 points. The other 20 points is similar to what I just explained. The job has to be on the skill worker list. And I believe there may be a link at the end of the slides in regards to the appendix skill occupations. Otherwise, if you do want to find that later on, all you have to go to Google and type in appendix skill occupations. That will have a whole list of jobs which are applicable under the skill worker category. The other 10 points to make 50 points is in regards to English language requirement. There's various ways of achieving this. First and foremost, as you all here assume as students, on student visas, you'd have satisfied the English language requirement as part of your student visa. So you could rely on the same B2 level certificate, for example, as part of your skill worker category, skill worker visa application. You could provide a degree certificate at a BA level or above. Or if you had to, for example, if you're making an entry clearance application for the first time, then you could satisfy what is known, as an IELTS certificate at least B1 level. And that has to be in all 4 components, similar to what you would have done for your student visa, that's speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So that's 50 points as what is known as mandatory points. The other, in regards to the remaining 20 points, they're known as tradable points, but to simplify things, let's just call it in regards to salary requirements. So there are certain ways of how you can meet the salary requirements, and we've tried to simplify it as easy as possible. And what's most likely going to be applicable for you having to switch at this stage to a skilled worker category. So just to let you know, there's different options, and the main ones that we're going to focus on is A to E, which I'll explain short while, and there will also be another category which is K. I know it jumps a few letters from F, G, H, I, J, but that won't be applicable to you. That's for those who are already on skilled worker visas. And if for any reason any of you who are sitting here online are on a skilled worker visa and wish some advice in regards to the transitional provisions, we can always ask that in the Q&As. But for now, we're going to do it on the basis that you're all going to start skilled worker visa categories on a fresh basis. And for that reason, the main options will be A to E or a possibility of K. And K is just to do with health and care worker visas, which I'll explain to you. So option A is the starting point for all skilled worker visas. So in order to obtain a skilled worker visa and to obtain the relevant points, the threshold in terms of salary is 38,700. Okay. However, there are some exceptions in the later options, which I'll explain, but just think of it as if for any reason you're not on a student visa or on a graduate visa, in order to get a skilled worker visa, you have to be paid at least £38,700 per annum, based on a 37.5-hour working week. However, if for any reason the job that you're applying for has a relevant or higher going rate to that, what that essentially means is, again, let's just use an IT engineer role, for example. So when you go to the appendix skill occupations, they'll have a going rate for that role. So the government use a national office statistics, which they believe that a certain profession will be paid this amount for starting. So let's use lawyers as an example. Let's just say lawyers have to be paid 40,000. So instead of being paid 38,700, you have to pay the going rate for that role, which would be 40,000. Hopefully that's quite clear. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, I can see a few nods, so that's good. So that's option A. However, for those who are, in regards to option B, for those who are holding a PhD for those who have a PhD and their job is relevant to the PhD qualification, for example, they could get they could be paid a lower going rate. So instead of being paid 38,700, they're paid 34,830, or they could be paid 90% of the going rate for the role. So as long as they're paid 34,830, or if depending on what the going rate for the role is, they could be paid 90% of that, whichever is higher. So that's for PhD equivalent jobs, or those who have got PhDs. Option C is in regard to those who are holding a PhD in a STEM subject for science, technology, engineering, maths. Again, there's even a lower rate for that, for example. So you could be paid 30,960. So again, going down from 38,700, you could be paid 30,960 if you hold a PhD in a STEM subject. Or again, even a lower reduction, instead of 90% of the code similar to PhDs, you could be paid 80% of the relevant going rate for that particular role. Option D is it could be a popular one. It used to be known as a shortage occupation list. So basically what immigration salary list in regards to option D is for any jobs, or is really is reduced quite substantially since the changes came into play in April. First, there used to be around 45 jobs, for example, where they used to be known as shortage occupation roles, where there's a requirement for these sort of roles in the UK. And there used to be numerous IT-related jobs on there, scientific jobs. Now, again, in terms of engineering type jobs, they're usually on there, construction's on there. So these are jobs where there's a requirement or need for those sort of workers in the UK. And there's around 21 jobs in total at the moment. Again, this could be found on, if you were to put immigration salary list, again, in Google, you'll get the Home Office gov.uk website that will have the immigration jobs which will fall within that. Again, because there's a shortage of these roles, there's a reduction in the salary requirements. So this is, as long as you're paid 30,960 for a job which is on the immigration salary list, that would be sufficient. Unlike the others, where there's a 90% reduction for PhD students, or 80% for the going rate, which could also be paid for immigration salary list, there's no percentage reduction. As long as you pay 30,960 or the going rate for the role, then that would be sufficient to meet the salary requirements. Okay, so option E is a popular one, and it applies to probably 900% of you that are here in the UK. So in order to get a salary reduction, I mean, the Home Office are aware that those who are new to the labour market, or when they get jobs, so you're not going to be paid a salary equivalent to someone who's been working for 5 years or 10 years. So they're going to that. So as long as, again, this requirement has increased quite substantially. Before the changes, it used to be 20,960, but now again it's gone to that level of 30,960. So it's still a reduced level compared to being paid 38,700. Now, so you get offered the employers will have to pay you 30,960 or the going rate for the role, but most of the times the 30,960 will be sufficient. And the question is, who qualifies for new entrants? So in regards to being able to qualify for new entrant, as long as you're under 26, so not 26, you have to be under 26, or your most recent permission could be as a student. So for example, a student or on a graduate visa, so you can, even if you're switching from a graduate visa, you'll qualify, or if it's within the 2 years of completing your student visa or your graduate visa. So if you're completing your studies this year, if for any reason you don't find a job straight away, but within the next 2 years, you could still rely on the fact that you just completed a student visa, or on the basis of an age, if you're under the age of 26. So again, just a key takeaway, if you're under 26, switching from student graduate visa, or have done student graduate visa within the last 2 years, you can be paid 30,960 instead of the actual going rate of 38,700. So most likely for majority of you will be, I'll probably say option B if you're a PhD student, option C if your PhD is in a relevant STEM subject. Option D, if you find a job in the immigration salary list, again, the chances for that now are slim because the criteria, so in terms of the jobs that are there, are minimal, but you never know, there's a possibility. And option option E, sorry, is most likely the most common one for students or graduates. So what are the benefits of recruiting a new entrant for employers? So, we do get this quite a lot from employers themselves that, is there a way of reducing salaries, for example, because 30,960 was quite a large jump from what it used to be, and not many employers would be willing to pay that. But again, there's still a benefit for the employers. They could be paid a reduced salary to the potential candidate. So again, let's just use a IT engineer role. I keep using that example, but if the going rate's 40,000, for example, but there's a possibility of paying 30,960 for a new entrant, they'd be more than happy to pay that. It saves the company £10,000, for example, in annual salaries. So it's quite beneficial for an employer. The next one is, in terms of those who are, let's say, for example, you're on a graduate visa, we get this a lot as well, where potential candidates or employees have been working for an organization for 2 years. In that 2 years, the employers gets a chance to see, your capabilities in terms of for you as an individual to build your experience. And then the company can decide whether it's worth offering the sponsorship, because sometimes with the amount of costs associated with the whole sponsorship process, employers, especially smaller businesses, are a bit reluctant. Is it worth the risk of paying £10,000-15,000 in the whole sponsorship process plus the increase of salaries if it's not going to work out? Whereas if you've been working for an organization for 2 years or 1 year whilst an undergraduate, then it gives confidence to the employers that yes, this person is worth keeping on. And we do get that a lot with those who are on graduate visas, where they've built their experience, they've showed what they're capable of, and then most often than not, the sponsors do tend to, or the employers do tend to sponsor them for skilled worker visas. So it's definitely worth considering. And then again, the last one is becoming a common strategy. Exactly the examples that I explained, as part of the second one, that employers want to see, is this person worth the expense, the time, and to worth keeping on in regards to being offering them the sponsorship for further 3 years or 5 years. So it's definitely a good, becoming very popular now, especially with the changes and the higher increase in salaries. Okay, so as I mentioned, there is one other one that skips a few letters to option K. This one's mainly for salary requirements for health and care worker visas. The difference for health and care worker visas in regards to the salary requirements is a much reduced requirement. And so instead of 38,700 or even 30,960, you can be paid 23,200. Now, so a lot of health and care worker visas, health and care worker professionals are paid 23,200. I represent, for example, a lot of dental practitioners, as long as they're paid 23,200. But one difference when it comes to health and care category is, instead of the statistics, which is provided usually by what is known as the O1S, Office of National Statistics, these are health and care bandings are usually dependent on NHS bandings. So if you were to work for the NHS, they'll have band 3, 4, 5, 6, for example. And as long as the banding that they have to assess which job, again, let's use an associate dentist, for example. An associate dentist is a minimum band 5 or band 6. Then if you go to the, again, the gov.uk website, they'll have a minimum salary requirement for that band 5 or that band 6 for that dental practitioner. It has to be above 23,200. Or B, it has to be the relevant banding rate. So if the banding rate for a dentist is 40,000 in accordance with the NHS banding for band 5 or band 6, then that's what you have to be paid. Okay, so again, starting point for health and care, 23,200 or the relevant banding. And that could be for various health and care jobs as a doctor, a dentist, just a care provider, for example. Okay, so what I just explained there was how to meet the 70 points. So again, getting a certificate of sponsorship, having a job on the skilled worker list, having the relevant English language, and the financial requirements. So that's 70 points. But on top of that, there's also a financial requirement. Again, similar to what you would have had to prove when you applied for your student visa. Now, when you apply for a skilled worker visa, again, you need to show that you've held £1,270 in your account for at least 28 days prior to the date of the application. However, there is one way where you won't need to show that, is if your proposed employer on the certificate of sponsorship was to tick a simple box that says they'll certify your maintenance for the first month of your visa, and you don't need to show any finances. Or if you've been in the UK for more than 12 months as well, that could automatically satisfy the financial requirement. So these are mainly for those who are applying for entry clearance, where, they, if, for example, they haven't lived in the UK for 12 months, you'll have to show that unless your sponsor wishes to certify your maintenance. There are certain skilled worker jobs that would require a criminal record certificate, mainly health and care type jobs or jobs where you're going to be working with the public. So as a teacher, for example, more 100% of health and care jobs would require them because you're going to be working with people. So that, in terms of the criminal record certificate, it's usually for any country where you've lived in for at least 12 months in a 10-year period. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind depending on the role that you're going to apply for. Now, what are the main conditions as a skilled worker? So usually they offer the sponsorship of either 3 years or 5 years. So if you were to get a 3-year sponsorship, you then apply for a further extension for a further 2 years. And once you've done 5 years, you can apply for settlement in the UK. There's no access to public funds, so similar to most visa criteria for anyone who hasn't got settled status in the UK. There's work permitted in roles, sorry, the work is only permitted for a role that you're being sponsored for, so that's full-time employment. So whoever's on your certificate of sponsorship is what you're going to be employed as. However, supplementary employment is permitted, and they have relaxed the rules on this. First, it used to be only supplementary employment similar to your relevant job, which is assigned on the certificate of sponsorship. So again, let's just use IT and engineer. That if you wanted to do additional employment, it had to be in accordance with IT engineer. But now you could do any job as long as it's still on the skilled worker list. So again, use an example. A chef is on a supplementary employee. I'm sorry, a chef is on the skilled worker list. So if your main job is as a IT engineer, but you want to do some additional work for some additional income, you get yourself a job as a chef. That's on the skilled worker list, so that would satisfy the supplementary employment. But again, only up to 20 hours. The voluntary work is permitted and you can study, but as long as it doesn't interfere with your main full-time job. And again, as I explained right at the start, 5 years, after 5 years as a skilled worker, it can lead to settlement. In terms of the documents, they're not very document heavy in terms of the documents that you require. Like all applications, you need a valid passport. You'll need your e-visa because biometric cards are going to be extinct from 31st of December, as Nancy explained. There's the financial requirement, if applicable. So you'll have to provide your bank statements if you do need to show that 1,270. English language confirmation, so just use the same certificates as what you would have used as part of your student visa if required, or by then hopefully you've all successfully obtained some sort of degree, so you could put that in as well. It goes down quite well, especially if it's related to your job. So if your course is in engineering and your job is going to be in engineering, it shows that you've got that link and experience, or not even that experience, you've got the qualification to do that role, so it satisfies the genuineness of it. You may require a criminal record certificate, as I've explained. And again, similar to graduate visa, which Nancy explained, if there is a scholarship, if you did have a scholarship as part of your previous visa, then that will have to be provided. And there'll be documents which are required for family members because dependents are permitted on this visa route as well. So again, proof of relationship and birth certificates, marriage certificates, things like that. So I'm just, again, so that's in regards to the skilled worker category, but I'm just going to touch upon some work conditions as a student because it's quite important. So if you're studying, so if you're here in the UK as a student, you could work part-time up to 20 hours, which I'm sure on your e-visas or biometric residence permits, it usually mentions that. However, you can work full-time out of term time. So some holidays, Christmas holidays, or even sometimes when you finish your course, you can work on a full-time basis. You could work full-time as a postgraduate doctor or dentist as recognized in the foundation program when permission is granted, and as a student sabbatical union officer for at least 2 years from when the permission is granted for that particular purpose. Now, there are certain exemptions of what you can't do as a student. So, for example, you can't be self-employed, work as an entertainer or professional sports person, or fulfill a full-time role unless a recognized foundation program permits it. Okay, so again, one of the main takeaways that we do get asked a lot as students is, can I be self-employed, start my business as a student? No. Under skilled worker, yes, you can, but as long as it doesn't interfere with your main role. And sometimes it can be quite difficult to track the 20 hours if you are going to be self-employed as a skilled worker. So it's best to avoid it if possible. But again, as a graduate, when you're on a graduate visa, there's no exemptions for self-employment. So when can I take a full-time role? Now, again, because that's quite small, I'm just going to hopefully people can still hear me if I stand here. So you could take on a full-time role or job once you have completed your course, i.e. out of your term time, which I'm explaining at the start. And you should not take on a full-time permanent position until you have submitted a valid skilled worker graduate application, and your contract must be fixed term or temporary. So to take away, in simple terms, don't start your full-time job until you have completed your course. You can take on a full-time job once you have completed your course, and you should not take on a full-time permanent position until your course has been completed. So in terms of when employers ask, in terms of are you allowed to have a permanent position? No, until your course has not been completed. It has to be usually a fixed-term contract. Now, for graduate visas, you must have successfully completed your course to submit a graduate. You have successfully completed your course to submit a graduate visa application. So quite straightforward, exactly what Nancy explained. And for skilled worker visas, in most occasions, you must have completed your course to submit a skilled worker application. There are certain caveats in regards to when it can be done. For example, condition B, where you don't have to have completed your course as long as the CAS date is after the CAS end date. But most of the time, again, once you have completed your course, you could, and you apply for a skilled worker visa, you could start the role. Now, these are just some common Q&As in regards to skilled worker category. So how do I find a list of sponsor license holders? And again, when you do get the slides, you can have access to these links. So there is a link where it has a list of all sponsors, and there's over 1,000 now, I believe. So you could scroll down at your own pleasure. And how do I know if a job is eligible for a skilled worker work? And again, exactly what I explained when towards the start. If you were to click on that link of Appendix Skill Occupations, has a list of all skilled worker roles and relevant salaries next to it as well. And the good thing is, not only does it have a going rate salary, each section will have the minimum criteria salary for option A, B, C, D. So whichever one you wish to refer on. And what information documents are required to establish a genuine vacancy. So again, this is this is from that mandatory list of documents. This is a good example of, for example, to prove that it's a genuine vacancy. And in order to do that, you provide, for example, a CV, so that will show your educational qualifications. If you have been working for the organization that's going to be sponsoring you, or another organization with a similar job title or a similar profession, then at least it shows the Home Office that you have got the relevant skills and experience to do that particular role. So a CV and is a good example. Degree certificates is a good example. And also, if you can get letters of references from previous employers, one or two, for example, to show that you have worked in a similar type of role, again, that goes down quite well to prove a genuine vacancy. And again, your employer, they just need to provide the cost anyway, but if you want to provide a further letter of support to say they wish to sponsor you, and that will make it a further strong application. Okay, so again, I know on here we mentioned job advertisements. So if the role was, for example, advertised and you submit an application for the role through that way, you could submit that as well. And can I switch employers when I'm on a skilled worker visa? The answer is yes. You could switch to a different employer, as long as, again, it's within the skilled worker category. And it's a different application. So you will have to make a new application. It's a change of employment skilled worker application, which is essentially similar to any sort of skilled worker application, but it is something that is permitted. Now, so in regards to other options for graduates, so I've mentioned all about, Nancy mentioned a graduate visa, which is a common one, and skilled worker. But as I've mentioned right at the start, some other visa categories that could be applicable is, again, you can switch into a family type visa. So based on marriage, relationship, if they're British, settle someone, or, some other visa category, for example, there could be a way where you could switch as a family member, but most likely they have to be settled and British. There's an innovator founder route, which is an endorsement type application. It's mainly for those who wish to set up a business here in the UK. There is an endorsement criteria. So before you can apply straight for the visa, you do have to contact one of the endorsing bodies that will assess your business plan and your business idea. Most likely it has to be innovative and scalable and viable. And based on that, you could apply for innovator visa. The Global Talent Visa is broken down into various categories. You can get arts and culture, for example. Those are for those who are performing theatre, actors, actresses, or visual arts, something that's in the creative industry. You can get an endorsement from Arts Council England. Global talent could be digital technology, where you get endorsements from Tech Nation, for example, or one of the endorsing bodies. And also for students, research or scientific related research programs is usually a common one. A Global Talent Visa is a great visa in the sense that you can lead to settlement after 3 years, or even settlement after 5 years as exceptional promise. The thing about the Global Talent Visa, again, it's a non-sponsored route, so you don't need to heavily rely on being offered a sponsorship. So again, it's one of these where if you feel as though that you do have a relevant, experience to apply for the Global Talent Visa, is definitely highly recommended. And most of these routes can lead to settlement in the UK after 5 years. However, as I've explained, the Global Talent route or even an Innovator Founder can lead to settlement after 3 years, but Innovator Founder is far more difficult, and there's not many applications that go in because of the high criteria, but it's not completely impossible. And we've put some useful links for you for when you have the slides. Again, the gov.uk in regards to the graduate visa and the skilled worker visas. And then again, we've put our links in regards to our websites for both graduate visa and skilled worker visa if you'd like some more information. And hopefully that was all clear. And if you have any questions, both Nancy and I will be more than happy to answer.
Thank you for that, Mohammed. And thank you, Nancy, as well, for all the information you provided for the graduate visa and the skilled worker visa. Thank you as well for submitting the questions via Slido. We have quite a few questions on Slido now that we can get through. So I'm just going to move on to the slide here where you can see some of the questions. Before we get to them as well, I think there are a few things I want to mention here. I've mentioned this on Zoom, so hopefully our participants on Zoom will know on Slido, there's a feature to upvote certain questions. So if there are any questions that you are interested in as well, or you want to ask as well, that's a way to get it higher up in the priority list for our attention here. So feel free to take a look at the list of questions on Slido now and upvote the ones that you are interested in as well. I know that you mentioned the graduate visa route, which is a more flexible route for employers to recruit. And then Mohammed, you covered the skilled worker visa route as well. I think the new interim criteria is probably something that's quite relevant to our students specifically. So we may be anticipating some questions here as well. We do have some resources that the Career Service has secured for looking at the list of employers who are able to sponsor a skilled worker visa, and you can filter by sector, etc. So I'll give you a quick demo in a bit after our Q&As. But now, shall we make a start at the questions now? So shall we hover in front of my laptop, if that's all right, so we can all be on the screen as well. Right, so the first one, in a job application, the form usually asks if I will need sponsorship from the company in the future. Do I need sponsorship if I have a grad visa? This is actually something I've gotten a few times from students in appointments and workshops. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, yeah. So let me have one quick read of it. When filling out a job application, the form usually asks if I would need a sponsorship. Yeah. So if you're on a temporary visa, in order to switch to the skilled worker visa category, then yes, you would require sponsorship. So if the employer asks in the form, do you require sponsorship? Then yes, you will have to be honest and answer yes, because without that sponsorship, the employer won't be able to recruit you. There is a mandatory requirement, or by law, that all employers in the UK, whether you're willing to sponsor or not, they have to conduct relevant right to work checks on a potential employee to see if they've got a right to work. And if you don't have the sponsorship, then there's no way of them employing you. So for that reason, yes, be honest and state that you would require sponsorship.
I think we have a follow-up in the room here.
If the job is only like a year, would you say that it is sponsored? Like if I'm putting it on the form, would I say, yes, I am sponsored? Because I have a grad visa.
Yeah, sorry, say that again. If you could just repeat that.
If the job is only a single year.
Yeah.
And I have a grad visa, do I say that I do need sponsorship or
Yeah,
not?
so I mean,
Even
one
if
year,
it's a single
yeah,
year?
if it's any particular, even if it's a year, 6 months, if it's going to be a sponsored role, then yes, you will have to mention that you would require sponsorship. But if you're on a graduate visa and you have no intention of staying in the UK beyond that, then you could just put no. Well, you know, well, only if you want to be sponsored for an extra 1 year on a skilled worker visa category, then yes, you will have to answer that correctly.
Thank you for that. Shall we move on to
Yeah,
the
that's
second
fine,
one?
yeah. Yeah. Do you want to choose a question or should I just answer from there?
Yeah, you can answer
yeah.
from there.
So the second question is, if I get onto a graduate visa for 2 years and I switch to a skilled worker visa, what would be the minimum salary requirements under the skilled worker threshold? So anyone switching on from a graduate visa or student visa would be regarded as a new entrant if they're switching straight away or within a 2-year period from having completed that visa. Then the minimum requirement is 30,960 or the going rate for the role, whichever is higher. So again, when I say going rate for the role, if there's a certain profession that has, when you go onto that appendix skill occupations, if it mentions that the role going rate is 32,000, then instead of paying 30,960, then you'll have to pay 32,000. But most of the times, as a new entrant, just think of it as baseline 30,960.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so my course start date and end date on my CAS are 16/9/24 and 30/9/25. Just over a year for graduate visa, I should not leave the UK. Sorry, it's just that gone away.
Oh yeah, that's the second one now. Yeah,
Oh,
we're just
okay.
clearing the answered ones here. It's
Okay.
quite a specific one as well, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Sorry, I'll just read that question. Where is it? Where is it?
Yeah, so it's here.
Oh, the second one. Oh, right, sorry. Let me just read that in my own words. Sorry. Yeah, so it's just over a year for a graduate visa. I should not leave the UK at all. I mean, again, you can leave the UK as long as you return back to make a graduate visa application. Yep. Yeah, I mean, Nancy will clarify this, but I mean, I'm sure she touched upon it, but she's confirmed that.
Yeah, sorry. So it is a requirement that if your course is 12 months or less than 12 months, then you have to study in the UK for the full duration of your course. So if your course is just over a year, I think it's a bit tricky if you want to travel, especially if you want to travel overseas for a long period, more than 2 months, for example. So for, you know, to be safe, to be on the safe side, I would say try to minimum your overseas travel. If it's just 1 or 2 weeks, you probably should be fine, especially if it's during holiday time. But you know, to be on the safe side, if you do want to apply for a graduate visa, try to just be in the UK because it's only just over a year. Yeah.
Yeah, and can I just add as well? I think this is technically a question about the student visa condition, actually. So for queries about the student visa, I do recommend the student immigration team at the university as well. So for your current student visa that you're on right now, they can be the people as well to answer your questions. But for graduate visa or skilled worker visa, that tends to be the focus of our session today. So hopefully that's helpful for your question as well, whether you're online or in person. I'm not sure. But yeah, can we move on to the next one?
Fine, yeah. So the next question is, what are the requirements for switching to global talent from the skilled worker visa? Now, in regards to the requirements for this, just to let you know, the global talent visa is a 2-stage visa process. The first stage is to obtain an endorsement, and B, once the endorsement is granted from one of the endorsing bodies, and again, that depends on what sort of criteria you wish to rely on, whether, as I've explained when I was doing the slides, whether it's under creative arts, research on scientific or engineering, for example, architecture, digital technology. So depending on your criteria and when you apply for the endorsement, and I mean, in terms of this presentation, we can't go through each criteria, unfortunately, but because again, it depends on what criteria you require. But all I can keep it simple for now in the sense that you need to apply for an endorsement first, depending on which fields you wish to apply for. Once you've got the endorsement, then you have to apply for stage 2, which is the visa application. Just to make you all aware, where we've had situations where we've been contacted by a couple of applicants where if you make an in-time valid application for switching into another visa category before your visa expires, your leave automatically extends until you get a decision, which most of you may know. However, just to make you all aware, if your visa is about to expire, let's just say on the 1st of January, you submit your stage 1 application for an endorsement before your visa expires. The stage 1 is not regarded as a visa application, although it's submitted via the UKVI website and everything makes it seem like it's a Home Office type application. It's not a visa application. So therefore, if you don't have a decision before your visa expiry date, you will be required to leave the UK and only come back once you've got your endorsement and you make a fresh entry clearance application. Okay, so bear that in mind. Stage 1 is a 2-stage process. Stage 1 is for an endorsement only via the Home Office website or UKVI website, but it's not a valid visa application. So it doesn't extend your leave by virtue of Section 3C, as Nancy explained. So while filling the job application, that the one?
Oh, I think we already taken that one.
Oh, okay, yes.
Oh, sorry. Oh, let me just go back to that. Right. I think the next one that we can take, it seems like it might be this one.
Last one,
If,
yeah.
yeah, the last one.
Okay, so if someone is on a 3-year skilled worker visa, what's the best route for ILR? So if someone's on a 3-year skilled worker visa, you've already done 3 years, well, hopefully you've done 3 years of your skilled worker visa, stay on that visa. And hopefully if you get a further extension in terms of a further cost for another 2 years, then once you've done 5 years in the UK, you could apply for indefinite leave to remain. Now, if for any reason your employer is not willing to sponsor you any further, hopefully you can find yourself another employer. If you can't and you're just in a dead-end situation, then unfortunately, that could be the end of the line unless you're able to switch into another visa category, which would allow you to switch into. And there are certain visas where you could combine periods of leave. So if for any reason you switch, or if there's a possibility of you switching to the global talent visa, you could switch, and you were to work 2 years on a global talent, you could combine the 3 and the 2. I don't want to confuse you, but there is a possibility that if you get it under global talent, exceptional talent, where you could get indefinite leave to remain after 3 years, technically you could apply for indefinite straight away because you've already done 3 years. So there is that legal technicality that can be used, but again, that's if and when it happens. We could always explain that later. But again, in terms of the 3-year skilled worker visa, you have to do 5 years to get indefinite leave to remain.
Yeah, thank you. I think our questions are back in order now. So now the top one here can be the one that we take next.
Okay, so on a graduate, so I'm graduating in December 24. What is the minimum salary requirement on the skilled worker visa? So again, if you're graduating, that means that you're on a student visa. You'll be regarded as a new entrant. So minimum salary requirement is 30,960, or the going rate for the role. If for any reason you've graduated, 2 years have passed, you're over 26 now, then you have to be paid 38,700.
Yeah.
So excuse me.
Yeah.
So
and then I think, can you see that here as well, by the way?
yeah. So how does the skilled worker valid visa for before it needs renewal? So is that one? The one's just over taking the apply for internship program within 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's a little internship one. That's all right.
Okay. I'll be honest with you, in terms of internship programs, I'm not too familiar with at this stage. However, unless Nancy can answer that, if not, then it's one that you can always email us. And
yeah, can I take this one if that's all right? I think by internship program, I assume you mean a graduate scheme that lasts for 2 years, because you mentioned it's after you graduate as well. So I assume it might be a 2-year graduate scheme that you're thinking of. In terms of the timing to apply to a graduate visa, that's after you have confirmation of you have finished your course. So for example, if you're a PGT student, it might be basically later in November when you have received that confirmation from the uni. So that's after your dissertation has been graded. So that's when you start applying for the graduate visa, getting an offer from Nancy, which seems like good confirmation for that. So that's essentially what happens with the with this question. I think you apply, you can accept the offer. It sounds like, but in terms of applying for the graduate visa, is after you have confirmation from the uni that you finish your course. Yeah,
that's fine. Nancy, is it okay to answer the next one about the PhD?
Which one? Sorry.
It says if a person secures funding or a scholarship for So I mean, after graduate visa, you could switch back into student visa.
Yeah. So
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so if you are on a graduate visa and you want to switch back to a student visa, that's possible. If you've got a CAS for your PhD study, and obviously you make the application when you're in the UK, so that's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
All right, so that we've answered, and then we can take the second one here. How long is a skilled worker visa valid for before it needs renewal? Upon renewal, minimum salary is required. So two-part question.
Yeah, so the skilled worker visa, it all depends on, I mean, usually it's 3 years or 5 years. Now, sponsors can give you, I'm sorry, I mean, it's either 3 years or 5 years. However, as a new entrant, for example, you can only be a new entrant for a maximum of 4 years. However, from that 4 years is if you're switching from student visa to a skilled worker visa. However, if you've done 2 years as a graduate, that 2 year or as on a graduate visa, sorry, let me make it clear, that means that 2 years has already been taken up from that 4-year period. So in terms of going back to the question, how long is it valid for? Let's just use an example here. You are currently on a graduate visa. You're about to do your 2 years, so you're about to complete your second year on your graduate visa. Now you're being offered sponsorship. So when they offer you a sponsorship, they're only going to give you, most likely, if they want to pay you a reduced salary of 2 years. So your visa period will be for a 2-year period based on your sponsorship. So how long is the skilled worker visa valid for? So yeah, like I said, it all depends on the length of your certificate of sponsorship, either 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. Now, upon renewal, what minimum salary is required now? So going back to my example, if you are here on a 2-year sponsorship as a new entrant, and you're being paid 30,960, when it comes to the extension, now you're no longer being able to rely on new entrant criteria. Therefore, you will have to be paid the option A of at least 38,700 or the going rate for the role. Okay, so once your new entrant provision finishes after either 2 years or 4 years, then you have to be paid the highest salary. So hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I'm just conscious of time and the amount of time that we have left for the Q&A. We should have another 15 minutes left, and we have another 12 questions, so we should be able to clear those. But I just want to mention we might not be able to accept any new questions after 2 minutes, so you have 2 more minutes if you do have any question you want to submit. But then after that, we won't be able to accept any new questions other than the ones already here on Slido. So hopefully that's all right. The next one, let's take dependents of a 3-year skilled worker visa holder are away for more than 180 days and then return to the UK. How will their permanent residence application be impacted? It's quite a specific one as well. Is that okay to answer? Yeah.
So the dependent partner has, when they settle, they still have the continuous residence requirement. So they have to meet, they can't be overseas for 180 days in any 12 rolling months period. For dependent children, there is no requirement for, for absences to the UK. So going back to this question, so with the 3-year skilled worker visa, so if you're applying for extension, then you'll be fine because there is no absence requirement for extension application. However, you do have to evidence that your relationship continue to be, genuine and subsisting. And if you have long period and separating from your partner, that you're overseas, your partner is in the UK being a skilled worker, then you might have problem evidencing how your relationship continues when, your partner is overseas and you're in the UK. The absences requirement only comes into play when you apply for settlement.
I can do the next week one.
For the graduate visa, would this be an issue if the class has a different course than the one completed? Foundation year was the same, but progression course changed. So it all depends on, did you have to apply for make a new student visa application because you was issued a new CAS? Then if that's the case, then I would say you can't apply with a previous course, because the whole point of graduate visa is that you have to have successfully completed the course which your most recent leave was granted for. Okay, so if your student visa was granted under a new course, you had to submit a new student visa application, you had to get a new CAS, then you have to rely on the new course for your graduate visa application. However, if you didn't have to obtain a new CAS, you remained on the same student visa, then the change of course name wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, in regards to English language requirement, only allow IELTS, or does it allow GCSEs English as second language as well? So yes, they are in accordance with what is known as Appendix English Language. That's one of the rules, immigration rules. GCSEs, if it's taken in the UK and the provider is an official provider, which is on the relevant appendix, then you can rely on a GCSE certificate. But again, it all depends on the visa as well, and I believe skilled workers should allow GCSEs. Yeah, so the top questions, if you have exceeded 20 working hours a few times on a student visa, will this affect your application? Yes, it will if the Home Office were to find out about it. In terms of, I would firstly strongly advise that you stick within what's permitted in terms of your working hours, because if you go above that, it'll be regarded as breaching immigration laws or because you're breaching your restrictions, and that could affect suitability requirements in terms of any future applications if the Home Office were to find out. So sometimes as part of skilled worker visa applications, we submit, if you're already working for an employer, of last 3 months worth of pay slips. If you were to submit them and the Home Office realised that this person has been working more than 20 hours during term time, then there could be an issue for both the employee and the employer as well, because the employer is not abiding by restrictions, which is clearly there on the e-visa or the biometric residence permit. So what happens when your company does not sponsor your visa, especially when you reach a 2 years deadline? So if for any reason you're on a graduate visa and your sponsor or your employer doesn't wish to sponsor you, then unfortunately, as harsh as it is, it's completely up to the employer. It's their business. If they don't wish to employ you, there's nothing preventing them from any responsibilities. It will be on you as an individual to either leave the UK or hopefully find another sponsorship if you've got time to do so. But there's no responsibilities in regards to the employer side of things. It's entirely up to them. So have we answered that question? Is skilled worker was the best route for ILR? Yeah, that's been answered, isn't it?
I think we have. Yeah, we have answered the first one, so we can skip to the second one. Student visa expires. Is that quite a specific one as well?
So if my student visa expires on 31st January, I should apply for graduate visa in January 25, even earlier. So you can apply as soon as you've successfully completed the course, right? Yeah. So yeah, as simple as that. You can apply as soon as you've successfully completed your course.
Yeah, so for the student, they mentioned they are finishing their studies, or their visa expires at the end of January next year, which I assume you might be doing a 1-year PGT course, because that tends to be the length of that right to work. I would say if it's 2025 of January, which I hope is what you have said, because the message have disappeared now. If it's January next year, then around November or early December time will be the time when you'll get the official confirmation from the university. Not necessarily to exactly that time, but usually from what we've seen, that's the scenario. Yeah, go on. So I think that was on Sweeta's question.
So yeah, I mean, first in regards to what visa should you apply if I do a PhD after my graduation. So there could be two possibilities. Firstly, there's the skilled worker route, which we've explained. So what visa? Sorry, I mean, after graduation, you can apply for a graduate visa or a skilled worker, or if you wish, you can even apply for a global talent visa, depending on PhD completion. And if you meet the requirements in regards to the different criteria, there's if you've got a fellowship or if you wish to do a peer review, it's quite complicated in terms of the requirements. So I would seek further legal advice in regards to that if that was a possibility. But that is a possibility if you want to go down the global talent route. Also, I have 4 months after my course completion, so can I work full time after my visa expiry? So yes, you can work. Again, if it's out of term time, you can, but again, it has to be on a fixed term basis. You can't apply you can't be a permanent position in terms of your full-time employment.
Yeah, and can I follow up on that as well? Because we do get quite a few of these questions from students as well. By course completion, is that the date that's marked by the CAS date, or is it actually just submission of dissertation can be fine?
Yeah, submission of dissertation is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so submission of dissertation will be regarded as your course completion, so it doesn't necessarily have to be the CAS end date, because that would be very close, I assume, to your visa expiry date. So once your course is officially completed, last exam, last dissertation, then from there you can work full time. up until your visa expires. However, it cannot be a permanent position unless you've submitted a skilled worker visa or graduate visa application. And Nancy just wants to add in that.
Yeah, sorry, just adding on that, I would always advise, once you've completed your course, then get a letter from the university just to simply confirm you've completed your course, because your employer might ask for that.
Thank you.
In regards to the IELTS, whether it needs to be recent, usually all IELTS certificates or English language certificates have a validity of 2 years. However, if you've used an IELTS certificate as part of a previous successful visa application, then there's no expiry date on there, for example. So if you use your IELTS certificate as part of your student visa, 3 years later you're applying for a skilled worker visa, you can use that same IELTS certificate. Yeah, so that's in regards to 4 years maximum numbers. That's 4 years if you're switching straight from a student visa to a skilled worker as a new entrant. As I explained a short while ago, if you from that 4 years, if you spend 2 years as a graduate, then you can only do 2 years as a new entrant because 2 years is taken from that 4-year limit. A public health role, I assume will be, or depends on what sort of role it is. Just to let you know, in regards to option K, again, on the gov.uk website, there's a list of jobs which are applicable for the health and care worker visa. So it might be worth looking on there. Again, the link should hopefully be there, or if you go onto that pending skill occupations, that will take you to a list of health and care roles, and that public health role hopefully should be there. I'd like to know what TV show it is.
I'd like to know as well.
To be honest with you, I've never had this one before, but it's a very good question. But again, I don't think you'll be regarded as an entertainer. I mean, if you're, again, I'm going to use Coronation Street as an example. As it may be, I do watch it, being a hometown show. If you are walking as an extra on that road, they're filming there. I think they're just going to pay you as the odd employee. I don't think they're going to pay you as an entertainer. Again, please don't take my word on it, but I very much doubt that you'll be breaching your restrictions. But it's probably worth getting legal advice on it just to be on the safe side. So congratulations, visa applied after a great. No, that graduate visa. Well, it has to be straight after your student visa, so you can't do any breaks in between, or being on a skilled worker and then going back to a graduate visa. So if you switch back to a student visa, then there could be a possibility. So graduate students are going to apply only to graduate visa. I mean, again, yes. Well, in terms of this question, if you don't get the degree that you're studying for, but we get situations where students have, they're undertaking a certain degree, they don't pass that specific degree, but they get offered a postgraduate diploma instead, for example. Now, in regards to applying for a graduate visa, that would be a possibility because it's not the course that you got the class in relation to, so there would be a difficulty in obtaining a graduate visa based on that.
All right, here we go to the final question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you as well, Mohammed, for and Nancy as well for taking all the questions. I think at one point we probably had 20 questions on the screen, and we had more as well. So it was a lot of ground that you were able to cover here. Can we give a huge round of applause to Nancy and Mohammed today? Thank you. Yes, let me use microphone as well. So I know we are, I think, about to reach time for the session that we have. I'm just going to do a few final wrapping up bits in terms of next steps, but also the support you're able to get from the career service. The first thing I'm going to try to do is to show you the QR code that I have on the screen, because that is the thing that you'll need to get the slides afterwards. We have covered a lot of information today, so that is probably something you'll definitely need. I'm just going to try to share my screen of the QR code as well, so people online can see that. So yes, I know some of you were in the session a bit later, so try to make sure you can scan the QR code here to register for your attendance, and that we're able to send you the slides and the recording afterwards. If you're online and not able to scan the QR code, you may have seen in the chat, my colleague Rachel Brunt is here as well. She might be able to take note of your ID number, so we can add that onto our email list afterwards. So either way, you should be covered, hopefully, in terms of resources afterwards. So just going to try to skip through quite a few slides to get to my slides as well. The most important thing I wanted to mention was our online resources, specifically for if you're looking for a skilled worker visa. Specifically, if you're looking for employers with a license to sponsor you on a skilled worker visa. What we have on the website, if you go to the pathway, I need to stay here. So if you go to the pathway on Career Connect, and then click on the pathway visas and the UK job market for international students. That is where the our bank essentially of employers are. If you go into the resource on the second one, in here, you will essentially find a list of employers who are able to sponsor you the skilled worker visa. It might not be all of them, but the major ones, the main ones that you'll be applying to for graduate schemes, for example, are definitely on here. What this can do is you can filter by sector specifically. So instead of a large Excel spreadsheet that you're trying to look through, you can actually look through according to the sectors that you might be interested in working with. But what it also does as well, which I'll show on the next slide, it actually shows you how many skilled worker visas they have sponsored among their workforce in the last 3 years. I highly recommend checking this out afterwards if this is something you know you need for your career, for example. It gives you a really good indication of how likely you might be getting a skilled worker visa from that employer if this is something that you really prioritize. In addition to this, they also have the new entrant discount salary calculator. As we know from today's session, the new entrant criteria will be quite important for you in terms of being able to go into the labor market and to get a skilled worker visa as well. But some of the criteria and the different options in there can be confusing. So hopefully this can be helpful to you as well, along with Mohammed and Nancy's advice today. We do have some information on the website in addition to work visa in terms of the recruitment processes, introduction to the UK job market, etc. So you can feel free to use this afterwards. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip through a few slides, but I'm sure if you're here today, you know about Career Connect, how to get support from us for events, one-to-one workshops, pathways, etc. You can connect with us on Instagram if you want to as well. These are all the slides that we were going to present. But in terms of the next steps, you will hopefully get some information in terms of how to get in touch with Nancy and Mohammed or your colleagues at Latitude Law for afterwards. In terms of getting in touch with us, you have the email addresses, but also one-to-one appointments and the faculty career droppings as well. So I won't go too far in that. The final slide. So before all of you go, I'm just wondering whether you are happy to scan the QR code here to give us some feedback. And what you're doing here, in addition to giving us some numbers here, is if I'm able to get a lot of feedback from you in terms of how useful the session might be, we might be able to convince our managers, for example, to provide more visa support for international students, which we know we might really need. But also you might be in the chance to win a £20 voucher as well. So some sort of monetary benefits here. So do scan the QR code if you like the session today, and if you really found Mohammed and Nancy's advice useful, or if you didn't find it as useful, feel free to give us some feedback as well in terms of what you like us to do differently. We're very open to feedback. So yeah, feel free to go for that.
Next session.
Yes, and Ghazi just told me as well, our next session, we have other of these sessions as well. If you haven't been here for the complete duration of the session, we have another one coming up that Rachel will be leading on the 27th of November, which is on a Wednesday as well. And it's at 12:30 to 2 as well on the day. Yes, getting a note from Ghazi. So you can also see that event on Career Connect as well, similar to the title and the content of this one. So feel free to reach out if you do have any questions. And thank you all again for engaging with the session and for sending in your questions. Best of luck with your job search then.